G'day friends and foes, I'm Arjay Martin and this is TINLA, or This Is Not Legal Advice, episode 45, and nor is it legal advice. So this is a short introduction to a candidates forum that was Breakfast with the Candidates today, and it was at the Gold Coast Convention Centre, Exhibition Centre, whichever way you want to call it, and basically it went from 7 a.m. until 9 a.m. and there were about 25 candidates. Basically, it covered the central and southern Gold Coast electoral seats for the Queensland state election, which is on the 31st of October, and I am running for the seat of Surfers Paradise. So a lot of you know that I have been trying to do protests, etc. at Surfers Paradise, and that has been unlawfully opposed, and it is what it is. So at the event they did have proper television cameras there, and I assume the thing was being filmed, and because I was there by myself I did not have anyone to hold my phone or whatever to record. It was basically done in two sections, so it was 2-minute speeches for people based on the name of the seat, alphabetical order. So, Surfers Paradise was last, and then within each seat they had the candidates speaking in relation to their alphabetical surname. So I am in Surfers Paradise and was the first speaker. And after you had your 2 minutes, they also had another section where parties were able to say what they were doing, and I got to introduce Reset Parliament. As I stated that we do intend on running in every seat for this Queensland election. We are months behind due to the COVID restrictions, the lockdown, the banning of my protests and political rallies by the government, which, surely most people see how ridiculous and how terrible that is, that you have the Labor Party banning a rival party not only speaking out on the illegal actions of the government, including the bureaucrats, but preventing the formation of a political party. Then there were subsequent court cases that have followed and are still ongoing. I need to wait for documentation from the courts before I can appeal it to the Supreme Court. Basically, it could also technically still be removed within that straight to the High Court. So I'd have to send out, separate Section 78B of the Judiciary Act notices to all Attorneys General in Australia for them to consider if they wish to intervene and or remove it to the High Court. Remove as in transfer it to. So I will do the second half first because I did film that when I wedged the phone between like a juice bottle and a water bottle and a couple of cups sort of thing, but then I'll do the first bit last because that is audio only. I might just stick a picture or something like that and you can listen for yourself. I'll also make another episode which I guess is just going to be the speakers or the candidates that turned up for the seat of Surfers Paradise, and I hope you enjoy it. Please like, share, subscribe, and let me know what you think, not only of my speaking and the other candidates speaking, but also of the ideas contained within. Thank you. Bye. Woo!
Gold Coast than ever before. We are the party that keep the other two in line. All the candidates for One Nation are grassroots representatives all over the state that have true care for their community. They're not career politicians. Most of them have lived in their community for a very long time, and they're not there to climb the ladder either. They're there for the community There's going to be 70 of us all together for the state, and I think it is time for us to make a difference. One of our major policies is the Bradfield scheme, which is being copied by the other parties now too, which One Nation have been behind for over 20 years. This is getting all the rain that happens up in North Queensland down to the farms in the other parts of Queensland that have droughts. And the same, like we will build dams to help with the farmers as well in the drought-stricken areas. Other policies that One Nation are truly passionate about is education, bringing back proper English and maths into the schools and having our children properly educated. I have an 8-year-old son where I have seen what really goes on in the schools and all the other agendas that go in the schools, where it really should be about our maths and reading and writing. Other policies are the law and order. We have really strong policies for law and order and youth justice as well. There's just not enough people being, held accountable for the crimes that they do. So One Nation have a lot of policies behind that for giving the police and the judges more availability to be able to do their jobs. And most of us candidates are small business owners or farmers. We're the real people of Australia, and we will have, shovel-ready projects ready for small business. And we want to stop fear for the Australian people. We want people to want to be prosperous and not stop living in fear. And I do feel that is what One Nation and the candidates will bring to the state. And it really is time to make a difference and help get the other parties held accountable by not just having the two major parties out there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask you to hang about for a second. We've got time for a couple of questions I'd like to put to each of you. Liz, Ros, in terms of the LNP's position on the border and the border closure, can you enlighten us, please?
Certainly. We've always said that the decision on the border should not be set and forget. It should always be based on health grounds, and yes, the LNP called for the borders to be open because that's what people on the southern Gold Coast were crying out for, but that was well before Victoria and Labor completely messed up the hotel quarantine down there in Victoria. In fact, it was Deb Freckington who called for the border to be closed to Victorians before the Premier. So we will always work on the health advice, and obviously the concern at the moment with the outbreak at the detention centre is that there could be a genomic link to the girls who came from Melbourne, the handbag girls, and that will be a concern. But a bigger concern, of course, is if they cannot find the source of that infection. So we will always want to protect the health of Queenslanders. In fact, the LNP's got a strong record on health in Queensland under Lawrence Freeborg, and certainly we want to keep Queenslanders safe, but we don't want to see everyone go bust in the meantime.
Thank you. Megan, it's going to be a close election. Well, it comes from a close start. So Parliament's very close as we see it right now. If you're the only sitting ALP member in the Gold Coast region amongst our state electorates, if the ALP wins Gold Coast, it's likely to continue and stay in government. What other seats on the Gold Coast do you realistically see being part of a Palaszczuk government if you head that way?
Look, many of you may remember back in the day when we did actually hold multiple seats here on the Gold Coast under the Beattie government, and we were able to deliver a lot in that time. You look at some of the infrastructure like the Gold Coast University Hospital, Metropolitan Stadium, there's a whole lot of road upgrades that occurred during that time. Any election is difficult, and I don't think anyone should take their seat for granted, and everyone should be working hard in the best interest of their community. I think that the Gold Coast will be a key battleground at this election because there's a lot at stake. And there are families in the northern Gold Coast particularly who want jobs, who work particularly in the construction sector, who want to see infrastructure projects fast-tracked so they can stay in employment. And I was actually talking to the Gold Coast Bulletin editor the other day about the fact that if you look at the small business numbers, the largest industry of small business is in the construction sector. So it's really critical that we're supporting those people during this period. So I think the northern Gold Coast is a key battleground. We've invested significantly in the growth there with new ambulance stations. We're building a new police station, fire station, 3 new train stations on the Gold Coast, all of those exits, 41 and 49, the M1 upgrades. There's a significant piece of work, and I think if people were voting on who is actually delivered, there would be a significant number of people voting for the ALP. But we can't take it for granted, and we've got to work hard, and we've got some phenomenal candidates. And the southern Gold Coast is also a key battleground as well. You know, Kaylee Camprad and Rabbit, both very much locals who understand that southern Gold Coast area, and it's been a tough time for them. I think we all acknowledge it's been a tough time for those border communities, and we've certainly tried to make some of those measures a bit easier for those locals who do need to travel to and from. But again, at the end of the day, it is our government who is delivering the M1 upgrades for southern Gold Coast. It's our government that's putting the money on the table to try and increase public transport in that southern Gold Coast area and preserving that heavy rail connection for future development as well.
Thank you. And Sharon, what role can we expect to see the likes of Pauline Hanson or Mark Latham play on the Gold Coast in this election?
Well, Mark Latham's New South Wales. He's head of the New South Wales One Nation Party, so that's where where he needs to put his efforts. Pauline Hanson is in the federal for Queensland for the Senate. We've also got Malcolm Roberts as well. So both Pauline and Malcolm do live in Queensland, and they do. They're there for us every day, and we can ask them questions. Malcolm Roberts is actually coming to the Gold Coast soon to meet all the people and businesses, and Pauline does come as well. So they're all federal, so they and that they live close by, so they are a voice there, and I can always call them if I need them.
All right, well, thank you for our candidates for that representation of your various parties. Please give a round of applause to Megan Scanlon from ALP, Ross Bates from ALP, and Sharon Stewart from the Nation. Thank you. And next up, if we can have Nelson Quinn from the Greens, Deb Lynch from Legalized Cannabis Queensland Party, and Arjay Martin from Reset Parliament. Again, we'll have 3 minutes from each candidate to tell us what their party represents at a state level. Thank you, candidates. Deb, we might kick off with you for, you can tell us what Legalised Cannabis Queensland means at a state level.
Well, to begin with, we don't believe that any one party should be leading the state. We need a broad crossbench to accurately represent our diverse community, and we don't want to be dictated to by party policies interfering with the action which is not in the best interest of the people. Legalised Cannabis Queensland want to, if any of us are elected, we'll introduce community forums and interaction so we can get feedback from our constituents, because that's who we're supposed to be representing. Instead of there being a flurry of activity and backslapping and backstabbing between the parties representing their policies. This is not in the best interest of the public. It's in the best interest of the party and their sponsors. Not one of the other parties supports full legalisation. Every one of them wants a pharmaceutical model, and that is never going to work with a cannabis-based medicine. It cannot be standardised because it has so many different strains and varieties, and each one of those has to be personally tailored to the patient. So a standardised product is never going to be successful, and we're going to have this battle for years to come. The Beattie government was mentioned earlier. Peter Beattie actually campaigned when he was elected to legalise cannabis, and that he was going to legalise 1 kilo for each person in this state. After he was elected, he backtracked and he said, oh no, sorry, I've only just realised how much that is and we're going to have to talk about it. Well, we're still waiting 20 or however many years later. Hemp can help with the recovery of the state. It can produce jobs in a variety of areas, from farming to manufacture of fabrics and textiles and retail. The construction industry could be using hemp-based hempcrete, which is carbon, not only carbon neutral, but it actually reduces the amount of carbon as time goes by. The stress on our health system could be impacted by more people being able to use cannabis medicine and not having to use the health systems or be a burden on the health systems quite so much. And crimes and policing. Victimless crimes are taking up the majority of the policing budget. People who are actual victims of domestic violence, assaults, robberies, all of those sorts of things, they're being kept on the back burner while the police budget is being wasted on soft targets. Tourism, if we only need to look overseas to see how cannabis has improved the tourism overseas, and the sky hasn't fallen in. We need to look at a carbon-based society which is sustainable and clean rather than a hydrocarbon-based society. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. And Arjay, we have a representation from Reset Parliament.
Yeah, thank you. So I am the founder of Reset Parliament. We are intending on running in every single seat in Queensland, although we've been severely hampered with, some of you may have read in the Gold Coast Bulletin about me trying to launch my political party with Surfers Paradise Police illegally, unlawfully prohibiting that. There has been subsequent court action where I'm fighting for each one of you to get rid of these illegal, unlawful COVID directions, border lockdowns, etc. We do have the likes of Professor Barodi, who is an Australian doctor, that states that there is a safe, cheap, effective medication to get rid of COVID disease. And that is ivermectin. You also have, as I said, hydroxychloroquine, which has been banned against all common sense. Reset Parliament is different from other political parties in that we don't have a binding of members or candidates. So basically the candidates are there to represent each electorate and the people of those electorates. That's why I'm here, to find out from you. If you'd like to speak to me afterwards, I'm more than happy to do that, or you can go to resetparliament.com, which is still under construction, but it has some information there. So another issue we have in Queensland is a lack of representation and community input into decision making. We should have citizen-initiated referenda, and back in 1917 there was a referendum to eliminate or remove the upper house of Parliament. People voted no to that. Yet in 1922 the Labor government actually just installed more members in the upper house and abolished the upper house, which is arguably unlawful, illegal, due to the defining nature of the Westminster system being that you have two chambers of Parliament. So I can waffle on about, there's plans for mandatory vaccines, including by the Prime Minister, or as mandatory as possible. And then he tried to go back on his word when there was the backlash about that. So again, mandatory medications are prohibited by section 51, subsection 23A of the Constitution, that the governments, and this applies to all levels of government, can provide dental and medical services without compulsion, or as it calls it in the Constitution, civil conscription. We also have a lot of problems associated with the healthcare field, including such things as the contamination of vaccines by stealth-adapted zoonotic viruses, which I'm sure a lot of people haven't heard about. but basically there are viruses in vaccines that have then gone into people and then subsequently into the blood supply, and some are sexually transmitted, such as simian virus 40 and simian cytomegalovirus. And my time's up, but thank you all.
Thank you. And last representing the Greens, we have Nelson Quinn.
Thank you. You can rely on the Greens Party and the people we already have in Parliament, and we hope to have many more, to continue to pursue environmental protection policies wherever they can. That's particularly important for the Gold Coast, it seems to many of us. Several speakers today have talked about the benefits of the natural environment we have here for our own way of life and to support the tourism industry. It's also one of the most biodiverse places in Queensland, indeed in the whole planet, so it's worth saving for that reason alone. You can also rely on the Greens to continue to support policies and programs of a social justice character that help our more vulnerable people in our society to get a better life, help more disadvantaged people to lose their disadvantage, close the many gaps that people keep exposing. You've heard today that from several speakers again that the state's falling behind in health and education matters and other things, infrastructure and the like. We wholeheartedly agree with that because the figures show that. So I'll just mention some policies here that the specific initiatives the Greens are putting forward for this election that deal with some of those things. So I get it right, I'll read a bit. The health, we want to build more public health facilities, hire more doctors and nurses and so on, to bring us up to more or less the same standard as Germany. That's a good comparison because we're one of the richest countries in the world, and so is Germany, similar in many ways. There's been a big falling behind in housing in Queensland, particularly what we call social housing. We want to see many, many more of those built and also improve tenants' rights when we do, so that people again have a safer space where they live. We want to invest money in the school system to bring it up to scratch. It's well behind now, as people already said to you today. Electricity's already been mentioned. The figures we've got, the studies we've seen suggest that if we reverse a lot of the privatisation that's gone on in recent years in the electricity world, we'll not only generate lots of jobs, but be able to slash electricity bills by about 46% over time. We would work towards better use of the solar systems, better solar feed-in tariffs, more cooperative generation capacity arrangements where neighbourhoods get together and build their own systems and so on. My colleague Scott's already mentioned the public pharmaceutical company to do research and bring down the price of lots of drugs. We also think that we can start to establish more manufacturing industries in Queensland based around our basic natural resources. For example, solar industries up around Townsville, wind machinery and so on around Rockhampton, lots of wind there, lots of sun in Townsville, and we're quite happy to adopt the ideas of the Grattan Institute about establishing green steel industry in Gladstone or thereabouts. Now all of those things would require some public investment. There's nothing new in Australia about public investment in new industries that are going to benefit the whole country.
Thanks, Nathan.
Thank you.
Candidates, hang about for a moment. If I just ask each of you a question, we'll stick with you, Nelson. Can you tell us what the Greens policy around the border closure is?
The Greens tend to support easily the idea of health number one. So we all have to put up with decisions or whatever, or systems that do that. The specifics of it are kind of interesting. People say we should just have one national system and so on and all that. The reality is that the situation is different all across the country. If we didn't have the state borders, we would have had to invent some borders for this purpose. We easily understand the difficulties of people who live around the border area, and what needs to be done there always, and I'm not suggesting it's not now, is individual situations have to be worked through. You know, in other words, you have to start with a kind of more or less a blanket approach, and you soon get word about where that causes difficulties or whatever, then you just have to keep working on that. The other thing that's been highlighted by a couple of recent events is the need for consistency in administration of it. And that also gets to the point that when you run down your public services and so on, it becomes much harder to do that. You've got too few people trying to do too much, and perhaps too many people out there ready to criticise rather than understand and help them do it better.
Thank you. And Deb, in Tasmania there are commercial, industrial and medicinal hemp farms. Is that part of the Legalised Cannabis Queensland vision, or is it more associated with individual use?
No, sorry. We would like to see the young and sugarcane industry in North Queensland could easily start to adopt introducing hemp into their growing practices, and that would give them more than one crop a year. And some crops, there could be multiple crops. You could have a seed crop, and you could also have the waste crop afterwards, which could be used for things like making into hemp-based methanol and running power stations. Now, any power station throughout the country that is presently run on either diesel or LPG gas can easily be retrofitted allowing these new seals to be able to start to run on hemp methanol. Now, that would be cleaner, sustainable. It would introduce a jobs platform into the area, because you would have to grow the hemp, you would have to process the hemp in order to run the power stations. So it would be a boon to the local areas as well.
Thank you. And Arjay, if Reset Parliament has candidates in all or many electorates for the October election, it could well be that you have a significant impact on tightly contested seats. So which parties would you preference in that case?
So I believe that people should make their own preferences. That's the way it should be. With voters, a lot of people have misconceptions about how to vote. It doesn't really help that you have different systems federally and council elections and state elections. But everyone is responsible for their own preferences. Whereas a problem with big parties in particular, being the two that form government for the last 100 years basically, is that if party A comes up with a great idea that's good for the majority of people, then someone from party B has to poo-poo that idea just because we didn't think of it. That is ultimately to the destruction, and it's bad for everyone. The same also applies if party A has a really terrible idea, and then all of their party members must support that ridiculous idea just because we have to win, we have to save face, etc. So basically, as I said, the Reset Parliament Party is the only party that is actively, I'm taking the COVID directions to court. There is ivermectin that can clear COVID disease in 48 hours according to Professor Barodi, etc. We also have both parties, as in major parties as well as minor parties that are parliamentary representing, that they aren't standing up for everyone. If you drive down the road and you don't see a sign that says 60 kilometres an hour, you get pulled over, then you say, well, I didn't see the sign, I didn't know it was illegal, then the police don't care. Yet the government itself is doing illegal actions and getting away with it, and no one in Parliament is standing up for the people against the illegal actions. We also just had a recent decision in the New Zealand High Court where they determined and made a judgment saying that the first 9 days of the New Zealand lockdown was completely illegal. So it's not just me saying things. I am, as I said, legally qualified. I'm not yet a lawyer, but but, you know, I'm standing up for everyone. And Reset Parliament also intends to do that and to represent the people themselves. So it's not really a matter of, you know, giving preferences or supporting some other party or whatever. There is a slim possibility, even though it's unrealistic, with the Stockholm syndrome that people have, and that is where people, you know, they notice that people that get kidnapped sometimes adore their kidnappers. Yep, no worries. And the lockdown.
Yeah.
Don't want it to be like Melbourne.
Stockholm syndrome just take us in a different direction altogether. So, we take your point on the preferences. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you to the three candidates here today representing their parties: Nelson Quinn from the Greens, Deb Lynch from Legalized Cannabis, and Arjay Martin from Reset Parliament. Thank you. So folks, we'll take a short break now. Enjoy the company around the table, have a good chat, and I'll be with you again shortly to close out the morning. Thank you.
Some interesting views there, Arjay.
Thank you. A bit different than everyone else trying to avoid the elephant in the room.
Yeah, no. So what inspired you to take it all on, to do it?
Yeah, so I have ran in various elections before. Up until nearly 4 years ago, I was from New South Wales. I did successfully prevent, where I was from was Lake Macquarie in Newcastle area.
Yes.
They had the largest rate rise proposal, as in council rates, or something like 90% over 70 years increase for Lake Macquarie City Council. And I, along with another fellow who had another little political party, but just like a local one, which was back to basics, successfully fought that, and instead of getting a top increase, they did the middle one instead. But basically, you know, I had to, me in particular, was embarrassing the government.
Hello, gentlemen. Just seeing if anyone would like a top up of the tea or coffee.
May I get a coffee, please?
Coffee?
Thank you very much. So basically, another part of it is that my parents used to live in Queensland, and they had a small business, and basically with police corruption, my dad was blackmailed that he would have to pay protection money to the police. This was back in, you know, the late 80s or whatever. And
So
then,
pre-Fitzgerald?
yeah, so they were Crown witnesses for the Fitzgerald inquiry. Then they literally had to flee to New South Wales, otherwise I would have been born in Queensland. But basically, you know, that inspired me that, you know, you must stand up to corruption, because as we see now, that people just do illegal acts and they get away with it. You also have things like, you know, Bill Heffernan did a speech in Parliament, in federal Parliament, saying, hey, look, there's these parliamentary paedophile suppression orders, a list of 28 high-profile people, including a High Court judge and a former Prime Minister, that were, according to witnesses or witness documents or whatever, were going into a child boy brothel in Sydney. Yet, you know, that's suppressed for 90 years. The Fitzgerald inquiry itself is suppressed for 90 years. So I have to wait until I'm, you know, old man on Zimmerman frame to find out what my parents had to say there, which is ridiculous.
And the Treasurer, Cameron Dick, and I toured a whole bunch of businesses the other day. There's 1,600 businesses, small businesses, who are the recipients of $9,600 each. And we visited a whole bunch of businesses the other day, including a bookstore at Burleigh Heads, who basically used the money just to cash flow, just to keep them going as there was a pause. The Palm Beach Surf Club, who were basically shut down for 10 weeks during the peak of the pandemic, and they used that money for renovations. We visited Jet Prints at Burleigh in the industrial area. They used that money, the $9.6 thousand, to enable them to go online for e-commerce, and that's been a really big help to them. And we saw Rack It Up, a great young company that is actually exporting to the United States. and they used the money. That was the job loan, just to keep the business going. As I said, there's 1,600 businesses across the coast that were the recipients of this. We were so well received. This has been a huge boost just to get the small businesses back on their feet on the Gold Coast. Thank you.
Thanks, David. We've actually got 20 seconds in credit, so we'll keep that to you later on. Michael.
Good morning and thank you, Dean. Michael Hart, I'm the member for Burleigh. I've been the member there for 8 years, having lived in Burleigh for 34 years of my life. I have 3 children and 4 grandchildren, all who live in the electorate. Now the big issues, Dean, in my electorate are light rail coming through the electorate in the future, how we consult with the people that live in that area, how that affects them, and I have grave concerns about that going forward, Dean. We've got a crime issue that is exploding in places like Burleigh, and as Sam said, on other parts of the coast, and we need to do something about that. Overdevelopment is something I'm very concerned about in Burleigh and Palm Beach, and we're seeing an explosion of 7 and 9-storey buildings side by side. We need to have a look at that. State planning laws affect that as well, Dean. Look, by far the biggest issue is going to be how we recover from COVID, because although the government has given out a small amount of grants, they've given some relief in payroll tax, any other help they've provided is in the form of loans. Now, Dean, going forward, there'll be a lot of businesses who are being helped out by the government's JobKeeper and JobSeeker program. When those things start to slow down, businesses are going to feel that effect. Now, as I move around my electorate, I'm talking to the businesses and the residents there. They're very worried about the future. So this election will be more about, I think, which party has the best outcome for the future, the biggest plans. We've already announced the Bradfield 2 scheme in North Queensland, which will have a massive benefit for people of Queensland. In my portfolio, construction is the big thing. I've got some big plans. We need to lower the price of electricity, which I'm also responsible for. We've got a hard task ahead, too.
Thank you very much, Michael. And thank you to the candidates for Burleigh. I really appreciate it. Can I have the candidates for Currumbin attend, please, which is Laura Gerber from LNP, Peter Bourgoin from the Greens, Kaylee Kempdra from the ALP, and Glenn Wadsworth from One Nation. And if I could have the candidates for Gavin on standby, that would be advantageous as well. And I think regardless of whether we have, what our view is of border closures, what our view is of government assistance towards businesses and community groups, there is no doubt that the impact of COVID-19 and its ripple effect throughout the community is the issue of 2020 going forward. All right, thank you folks for your attendance today. So Peter, is it? Peter, you start with the B, so you get Bourgoin stuff. Hi. B, not Peter.
I'm Dr. Peter Bourgoin, who's the Green. I'm honoured to be the Greens candidate for Currumbin. I live in the Currumbin Valley with my wife and younger son. We live in a beautiful part of the world. We are proud to live in the Gold Coast. We love living in the Gold Coast. We live in a part of the world which has become a tourist mecca for many, many people in Australia. But even before COVID, businesses were doing it tough. If you walked around Surfers Paradise, you'd see many, many closed shops. The Greens believe that small business has suffered as a result of the COVID crisis and the economic situation even before that. We need to plan for a recovery from the recession of COVID. That recovery will be led by small business. Small business as the people who empower this country and provide the jobs. But we are in a crisis. If we continue in business as usual with a fossil fuel-led recovery, we will see the barrier reef destroyed. We will see fires burning our precious forests and killing our wildlife. We will see the Gold Coast bit by bit flooded and surrounded by seawalls. We have to have a better way of doing things. The Greens are providing a model of a better way to do things. We need to have a renewables-led recovery, an ecologically sound recovery. A few years ago, if I'd said we have to go for renewables, that would have cost extra money. Actually, now it will save money. We have no choice, but we have to go for a solar recovery for the Gold Coast. I would like to see the Gold Coast become the eco-capital of Australia. It will rebadge the Gold Coast to attract tourism, a new form of modern community.
Thanks, Peter.
And I would like to see the Greens are the people who've got the science and the knowledge and the vision to achieve this. So give the Greens a go this time.
Thank you, Peter. Can I have Kaylee Campbell from ALP?
Hi, I'm Kaylee Camprad. I would say that Southern Gold Coast is a special, unique and different place. We're special because we have such wonderful beaches, we have world-class beaches, we have the beautiful green behind the gold, we have these beautiful pristine waterways. Nature has provided us with a fantastic outdoor playground, and as a community we love our lifestyle and we get into it. We're unique because we have world-class hospitals, airport, we have the universities. Small business is the backbone of our local economy, as is tourism, and we rely on them. And we're different because, unlike every other seat in the Gold Coast, we have a border. We have a border with New South Wales. And COVID has really made us realise that that border is, it's what is a little bit of pain a couple of times a year with daylight savings has become a great challenge for all of us as we straddle that border every day. That border, we feel the burden of that because we're keeping the rest of the state safe. But of course, it's also really affected our community, and we're feeling that at the moment. COVID has been a blow. It's been a huge blow to all of us. But I think it also creates some opportunities, and I see some hope in there, because at times like this, the government becomes really, really important. The role that we play, the support that we give people, the things that we put in place make a real difference to people's lives, keeping them healthy, our community health and safety, and then our economic response. We can do that because we've looked after the health of the community first. Leadership has become key in this, it's critical. Anastasia has shown that she is putting the health of our community first and looking after us so we can have a strong economic recovery. We can emerge stronger. I think there's an opportunity to combine the new confidence in remote working and appreciation for lifestyle destinations like ours to build a stronger, more diverse economy to complement a recovery in tourism. And given the unique challenges COVID has placed on our particular community and the opportunities that will come during the recovery and rebuild, have a strong, active, local, effective voice does make all the difference. 2 minutes goes very quickly.
Thank you, Carol. You did well. You got hoops in there. And Laura from LNP, please.
Good morning. I'm Laura Gerber and I'm the LNP member for Currumbin. As a long-term local, my electorate holds a really special place in my heart. I am committed to making sure Currumbin is the best place to live, to work, and to raise a family. As a mum with 2 young kids, I want to make sure that my kids don't have to move away for work if they don't want to. The results of my biggest community survey show that 82.1% of respondents believe there aren't enough jobs. I want to make sure there are plenty of jobs on the Gold Coast for Gold Coasters. And the best way an LNP government can support business to support jobs is to get out of their way. Most of you in this room know the biggest impediments to business, to growing your business and to creating jobs are higher taxes and red tape. Only the LNP has committed to no new taxes, and the LNP has a proven track record of reducing red tape. In the Currumbin electorate, I am wholeheartedly committed to busting congestion. It is imperative that a rail service is linked to the Gold Coast Airport. This will not only improve commute times locally, but it will service our tourism industry. I'm I'm also fully committed to the LNP's plan to build a second M1. A second M1 will take 60,000 vehicles off the existing M1, and I personally know the benefit of that, as I've had to commute to Brisbane in my former work as a prosecutor. It is also evident in my electorate that we need to crack down on crime. The recent results from my biggest community survey show that 92.5% of respondents are concerned about youth crime, and 85.8% are concerned about drug crime. As a former federal prosecutor, I know how important it is that our sentencing regime marries up with community expectations to deter offending, and I will make sure that I am working really hard to make that happen. The LNP is the party that understands business. Behind every small business there is a family, and I look forward to listening to business and to working with my community well into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, candidates. I really appreciate that today, and I'd like to make one little apology, Kelly. I mispronounced your last name. I kind of have one job, is to introduce candidates, and I screwed that up, so I apologise. No, but for the record, Callie Camprad, and I think your 20 seconds have been consumed by these guys, Rabbit, so you lost that. Could I have the candidates for Gavin, please, and perhaps the candidates from Mermaid Beach gather to my right. So the candidates for Gavin, in order of speaking, will be Kirsten Jackson from the LNP, Suzette Lukenfrom from the Legalized Cannabis Queensland Party, Megan Scanlon, the Assistant Minister of Tourism, Industry Development and Member for Gavin representing ALP, Sharon Sewell from the One Nation Party, and Sally Spain from the Greens. Thank you, ladies, and for all your attention and representation today. And we'll kick off with Kirsten for LNP.
Good morning, and I'm glad I've had my coffee. I'm Kirsten Jackson. I'm the LNP candidate for Gavin. I come from a family that's been on the Gold Coast since 1872, so we get the Gold Coast. We've been a part of its growth and development, and have seen it move to what it is today, and it's just a fantastic city. I'm a qualified accountant, and I've run a business with my husband for 15 years. At the end of every month, I print my P&L, and I sit down and I have a look at it, and I see what I've spent money on, I see what revenue I've brought in, and I make decisions about the next month and what I'll do in my business. This is how we need to run a state, by looking at what's going on. To not have a budget this year is appalling. How can we know where the state is going when we don't even have a budget? The next 4 years is not about COVID. It's about what is going to happen to Queensland. It's about getting projects up and running, projects that have been sitting on the table for 7 years with federal money offered and not being taken up by the state. It's about helping business by letting them get on with what they do. I've spoken to many, many businesses in Narang, Pac Pines, all of those areas. They don't want handouts, they want customers. That's the long-term solution to a recovery. I want to see the Gold Coast be the Gold Coast. At the moment, we don't have the customers, we don't have the vibrant projects, and we need to have a government that understands where we need to be.
Thank you, Kirsten. And Suzette from Legalized Cannabis Queensland.
Very good morning, everyone. I'm going to be reading today because I have a medical condition that causes aphasia. I have lived on the Gold Coast in the Gavin electorate for the last 11 years, and the only issue that always crops up with everyone I speak to is the crime and the lack of the unmanned police stations. I believe that a huge amount of money is being spent on prosecuting petty cannabis crime, and is not in the public interest, and is a waste of police resources. If cannabis were legal, or at least decriminalised, these resources could be diverted to other problem areas. Legalising, regulating and taxing a local cannabis industry would create jobs rather than criminals. Both major parties have stated publicly that they have no intention of decriminalising cannabis. I joined the LCQ party because I resonated with my top priority, which is getting cannabis medicine to patients who need it at an affordable rate. Queensland has twice as many patients on prescribed cannabis as any other state, and the greatest number of patients being prosecuted for daring to help themselves because they cannot afford legal products. The LCQ aims to put forward a private members bill to correct these problems and free the hemp industry from red tape to create jobs in the agriculture sector. Home growing and dispensaries need to be an option that provides users with safe supply and tax revenue to the state. It gives the Gold Coast patients a better quality of life, affordable cannabis for medical use, and police resources could be better utilised. It would be an absolute boom to the Gold Coast tourism economy, attracting interstate and international visitors. And the tax sales from locally grown cannabis will remain in the state and would help a post-COVID recovery. By standing for the LCQ, I don't have the might of a big party behind me, but I do have the will and the passion to take them to affect change. If I or any of my fellow LCQ candidates are elected to the crossbench, you can be assured we'll work for you and not the party sponsors. Thank you.
Well done. When you had 4 pages there, I was worried it was double-spaced and you actually came in on it. You did well. Thank you very much. I'd like to ask Megan Scanlon from the ALP.
I'm hoping this is working. Thank you very much, Dean. Jingari, everyone. I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of you before, but for those of you who I haven't, I'm a born and bred Gold Coaster. I actually grew up in the electorate that I represent in Narang, and my parents owned a small business there. So it's a great privilege to be able to represent that community. And of course, I am, at the moment, the only ALP member representing this community. And it's one of the reasons I put my hand up, because I think a city of this size needs to have fair representation of both sides, competition of ideas. And so during the 3 years in which I've been elected, I've advocated quite heavily for a number of things, mostly to diversify our economy. As a Gold Coaster who had to go to Brisbane for my first graduate job, I think it's really important that we're providing good, stable job opportunities for young Gold Coasters, and we've done that through projects like the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct, which has been touched on previously, and just yesterday, Minister Kate Jones announced we'll be actually expanding cohort at that precinct because of the demand that we're seeing there, and that's a great opportunity for so many young entrepreneurs in our city. But also making sure that we have the infrastructure to allow people to actually travel. If you do need to go to Brisbane for work, that you can actually get there in a reasonable time frame, and that's why one of my key commitments was that we would deliver M1 upgrades, and I'm really proud to say since then we've delivered Madravada, Varsity Lakes, the Gateway Merge, and we're already started that next piece down to Tugun, and also the Daisy Hill to 8 Mile Plains section. But we also need to revolutionise public transport in the city. We've done that through stage 1 and 2 of the light rail, and we're doing stage 3 right now. And of course, we recently announced stage 4, the business case, taking that light rail all the way down to Coolangatta via the airport, and also the east-west connections. And as a representative in Narang and Pacific Pines, those western communities, that's really vital, I think, that we're not just solely focusing on that tourism strip, that we're actually connecting people who live in those western suburbs as well. So we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the Palaszczuk government's economic plan later and small business initiatives, but thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
And Sharon Sewell from the One Nation Party, please.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Sharon Sewell, and quite a few of you already know me from a printing business that I own with my father. We have a team of 8 there, and my family have been in small business on the Gold Coast since 1984. So we have seen the ups and downs of everything here, from plane strikes to the electricity strikes, the GFC, and most recently the downturn in business that the Commonwealth Games caused for small business, which we were just recovering from, and obviously COVID happened. I live in Gavin and Narang. I'm with my family. I've lived in Highland Park and Narang for many years, and we love living out there. There's great assets out there. I want to be the grassroots representative for small business. There's over 2,000 businesses in the area that are on JobKeeper, so it just proves to you how important small business is there. We employ more than anybody else in any other sector. And the more we can keep like small business alive and thriving, the more we can, you know, input into the economy and employ more people. And I believe I've got the enthusiasm and the experience to help with that. In the areas that we live, we are the western suburbs that do often get forgotten about. And we really would like the rest of the Gold Coast to know who we are and to come and see the area. We've got great businesses out there that make Australian-made products, and lots of great other places. We've got bushwalking you can do, there's mountain biking you can do, there's so much that the rest of the Gold Coast don't know that's out there, and I want us to get on the map. I also am married with an 8-year-old who goes to school in the area, and so other priorities are, of course, the crime and education, and I really want to keep our freedoms and our Australian way of life, and I want to get the suburbs of Gavin on the map of the Gold Coast, and for people to want to bring up a family there, for it to be a safe place, a very clean place, and for people to want to open a business in the area. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we've got Sally Spain from Greens.
Thank you. History will be made here on the Gold Coast as the microphone is wrested from me after 2 minutes. It's never happened before. History was made by the Green Party when they actually held the balance of power federally and did not interfere with any legislation after making the agreement whereby carbon emissions fell because there was a price on them. That was the only time we have had that fall, and the dentistry scheme was brought in. That was the agreement. The Greens are not beholden to any big interests. I'm amazed at the platitudes I hear from parties who do cater to big interests and talk constantly to smaller interests. My parents were part of the smaller interests on the Gold Coast. They had a small business in 1960. The credit squeeze came. They were refused financing from the banks. But my mother's brother happened to have a huge import-export business in Victoria. He threatened to take his business away and suddenly they got their money. The Bank Royal Commission was brought in by the ABC. We noticed that the ABC staffing on the Gold Coast has been slashed yet again. Governments should not have to have the ABC tell them that there is injustice in the banking system. Small businesses on the Gold Coast should not have to suffer to get up early, to work all through the day, to fund and organise splendid events like this, and have 4 times the amount of shopping space of any major city, and have parties saying platitudes that they support small business. I'm fully conscious of small business. All of my children and my husband are in small businesses on the Gold Coast. Law firm, botany, dance school, and another lawyer. So we know very well that there has been no correct planning for the Gold Coast in terms of its future. How we can be still talking about image making and surface paradise years later when there is no parking, or virtually no parking, and poor promotion of the most wonderful city in the world, the most biodiverse. Our national parks, our splendid heritage, cited by Professor Hugh Possingham as rare in the world, has been carelessly used. We have no central parks. We talk about crime, we do not look at the reason for it, which is injustice. We do not look at the policies which the Greens fully have declared openly and are properly and correctly made with professional consultation with the bodies that are interested. We need to look at a future, and the Greens will do that, but we will not pick up a poison chalice of careless usage of our Australian environment and our beautiful city. We will not take that up. We want to get into concerted power now. Thank you.
Well done, Sally. Thank you very much. And so thank you to the members, the candidates for Gavin. It's been really diverse and very well presented by all 5 of you. So thank you very much. And we'll just head off on that other side. I don't know if you know, but there's a big clock down here that counts down from 2 minutes, and at the 30-second mark it turns red. And so for anyone who's not really familiar with that situation, it's quite confronting and makes you even more nervous. So I think what we've seen so far is some fantastic presentations. I'm really impressed by every candidate being able to articulate their difference and the diversity that they'll bring to this election. So thank you so far, and I don't mean that to put any pressure on the incoming speakers. We will now have the members for Mermaid Beach, and if I could have come to the stage, please. We have sitting member Ray Stevens, Deb Lynch from the Legalized Cannabis Queensland Party, and Stephen Jones from One Nation. If I could have the members for Mudgeeraba, or the candidates for Mudgeeraba. I keep saying members, I'm sort of jumping to the other side of the election. If we can have the candidates for Mudgeeraba going on the side, please. Anything we got. All right, so Mermaid Beach, this is my electorate. So I will start off with...
Dean, I like you.
Only one vote, Mike.
They all count.
We'll start with Steve from One Nation.
Thank you very much. My name's Stephen James. I'm here for the One Nation candidate for Mermaid Beach. I've lived in the area for about 17 years now. I've been coming up here from New South Wales for about 50 years. So how young I was when I was up here. But I'm here to help small businesses. I've run a small business for a while. It is tough, and so we need to make sure that small businesses have the opportunity to not only survive through this, but to eventually thrive when this pandemic finishes. So we need to address that, which we will. We've got some great ideas there to help small businesses grow. On top of that, my passion is also about education. Kids need to realise that there's hope for their future, so we need to have education in our schools that gives them that hope, that gives them that opportunity to know that they can achieve, they can work in the local area, have career opportunities without having to leave. Also, again, like most people talk about, crime, it is an area that we need to address, and again, we have some great policies to do with law and order. And going forward from there, we want to make sure that people feel safe in their homes, that that there is a response coming from police. That's enough police and that in the area. So that's important for me. I come from a security background. Actually, when this place opened, I used to work security in here, so I know this place well. So I'm here just to be the voice and to make sure that the Mermaid Beach area is not taken for granted. It's LNP all the way, which that's okay, but I think it's about time to make sure that I'm here to be a voice for the people of the area as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We could have Deb from the Legalized Cannabis Queensland Party.
I don't. Good morning, everyone. My name's Deb Lynch. I'm the mother of 6, including 2 sets of twins, and I have 9 grandchildren. My background was in the health industry. I was a phlebotomist for 20 years. I was also a pathology laboratory manager. I'm standing at the moment because we've been, as the president of the Medical Cannabis Users Association of Australia, I've been lobbying government in Queensland for law reform for cannabis patients for the last 5 years. Sadly, the majority of patients, 48% of the patients who are getting legal prescriptions cannot afford to pick those prescriptions up from the pharmacy. So they're having to turn to illicit supply to be able to treat their diseases, myself included, and the police resources are being wasted arresting sick patients like myself. We've got, I believe that the policing operating budget is $1 billion a year. 500 million of that is being spent chasing little old ladies like myself from being able to help themselves. The Queensland government received a petition of over 14,000 signatures earlier this year. That wasn't even debated before Parliament. It was just sent on to the Health Minister and ignored. So the government, be it the present government or previous governments, have not been listening to the people for a long time, and we would like to change that. We want the people to have more interaction in the running of the state. I mean, government's one job is to run the state and to oversee the public services. We have 40,000 people on the waiting list for public housing. We have an enormous waiting list for health. And to be perfectly honest, all of these departments need to be investigated as far as they're running. We saw Jackie Trad and the education suggest that from an inquiry, that the public service issues need to be addressed, and I believe the same thing happens here. I had a tumour left in my kidney for 5 months, and I lost my kidney due to administrative oversight at Gold Coast Hospital. I'm done. All of these things need to be addressed, all of these things need to be overseen, and it's not happening with the present round of people we have in there, which is why I'm standing. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Thank you, Ray Stevens from the LNP.
Yes, thanks, Dean. Ray Stevens, State Member for Mermaid Beach for the past 14 years and the only mayor, your mayor, that brought the rates down in my career in local government. But this election in 65 days' time is not just about coronavirus. It's the time to reflect on the last 3 years of the Palaszczuk Labor government and what you want to see happen for the next 4 years in Queensland, taking on board the fact that the majority of Australian businesses are effectively currently on the dole through the JobKeeper program by the Scott Morrison federal government, which is keeping many, many businesses afloat. It will get harder. That money will stop at some stage. So we have to be very, very sure of who we want to run Queensland for the next 4 years. And there's no better example of a government not in the interests of the Gold Coast, in particular Queensland, in your sitting here in this breakfast this morning. There was $100 million on the table for the extension of the convention centre, where we are here now, by Star Casino. Unfortunately, the Labor government wandered around with some airy-fairy thing called the Global Tourism Hub, which didn't eventuate, which wasted the money, and now the $100 million that was on offer from Star Casino is nowhere to be seen. Now that would have created a lot of jobs, and would have, the convention industry is big for the Gold Coast. We've only got to look at Auckland, we've only got to look at Adani, and this government hasn't cared about jobs for Queensland. Now that's important. I have a lot of fly-in, fly-outs in my area, working in those mines. We need a government on the 31st of October that will go forward for the next 4 years in the interests of Queensland.
Thank you very much. We thank the candidates for their seat at Mermaid Beach. Thank you. I'd like to introduce the candidates for Mudgeerbar who are with us today. The sitting member Ros Bates from the LNP and Scott Turner from the Greens, if you'd like to come up, please. And perhaps if the candidates for Southport could gather to my right, please. All right, so Mudgeerbar, another one of our rural residential areas. Ros and Scott, thank you for coming with us today. Ros, we'd like to kick off, please.
Thanks very much, Dean, and good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ros Bates. I've been the member for Mudgeerbar for 12 years. The Gold Coast Bulletin dubbed me the member for the M1 as far back as 2005, because my electorate used to go from exit 73 down to exit 85. I am a registered nurse, I still am, after about 38 years, and I have run hospitals, and I'm a former Telstra Businesswoman of the Year here in Queensland. My electorate, as Dean just pointed out, quite rightly, is rural. In fact, it's 75% rural. I have the built-up areas of Robina, Merrimack and Carrara, but I also am a border seat. I go right out to the border at Natural Bridge. So we've had our own issues about keeping the border open there, which we managed to do. I guess the biggest issues in Mudgeerbar have always been roads. Since I've been elected, we've had nearly $800 million worth of roadworks in the electorate of Mudgeerbar, including the M1, Warrongary Road, Springbrook Road, Narangma Willenbar Road and Beechmont Road, all of which had been neglected under the previous government. Crime is an issue in Mudgeerbar. I'm the Hoon capital of the Gold Coast. Anyone who's been out in Pine Creek Road will know that the Hoons love getting out there, and the LNP's announced some pretty tough measures on hooning. I'm also the Shadow Minister for Health and Ambulance Services and Women, and we know that under the Palaszczuk Labor government we've seen ambulance ramping double in the last 5 years. Code yellow's a matter of norm, waiting lists blowing out, and also waiting lists for the waiting list, as opposed to the LNP who cut the ambulance ramping by half and also cut the long dental wait list from 67,000 down to 0. As the Shadow Minister for Women, we put up some pretty strong policies on child safety. We know the child safety system is broken in Queensland, with 15 children dying under the Labor government in the last 5 years. And also on top of that, we are the domestic violence capital of the world, effectively. The last 22 homicides in Australia, 11 of them have been here in Queensland. We need to fix that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. And Scott Turner from the Greens, please.
Good morning, everyone. Since graduating from Palm Beach Cumberland State High School, I've worked in scientific research and then in administration in the areas of healthcare, education, crisis accommodation and mental health, and also as a customer service agent for TransLink. I'm excited to be here because we know that the majority of the jobs on the Gold Coast are in and created by small business. And the Greens recognise that, so we have a range of policies to basically, as we've heard before, to help small business. We know, that small business is facing a serious challenge because of the coronavirus restrictions, and now more than ever, we see the perils of putting all their eggs in one basket. I said back in 2017 that tourists don't come to the Gold Coast from all around Australia and the world to sit in a second casino and spend the money. They can already do that at home. They come to relax on the beach, explore the hinterland, go on a whale-watching cruise, and now, with the coronavirus restrictions, it's time to encourage domestic, local, interstate tourism. So the Greens want to basically keep a component as Greens want to boost consumer spending. So we have policies to reduce the cost of living, cutting electricity bills by 46%, making it public and pharmaceutical companies so that medications and medical treatment cost less, making it totally free school, no laptop fees, no textbook fees, no stationery fees, no art fee, etc. And we also have policies for free childcare, and we want to assist small business by cutting payroll tax, eliminating it, and fighting climate change, which threatens to drive up your insurance premiums. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. And could we put our hands together for the candidates for the Mike Bar. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the Convention Centre for keeping us safe. Not that I suspect anyone's got coronavirus, but 0 cases on the Gold Coast at the moment, so that's pretty cool. I'd like to introduce the candidates for Southport. The sitting member for Southport is Rob Mulhock from LNP, and Susie Gallagher is representing the ALP today. Thank you. Thank you, folks. We might start off with you, Susie, for the ALP.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Susie Gallagher, and I'm your very new Labor candidate for Southport. My family has lived and worked in the Southport area for over 48 years. My brother and I went to kindergarten, primary school and high school in Southport. My family helped shape Southport through their community involvement and their generosity. They helped build solid foundations for many local sporting and community groups such as the Southport Tigers, and sponsoring lots of local events over that time. Some of you may remember my father, Peter Gallagher. He was the captain of the Kangaroos. He spent 15 years on the Gold Coast Turf Club, 5 of those as the chairman, and he's part of the reason that the Gold Coast is a racing destination and not just a stopover. And all those people come and spend lots of money on horses and lots of money in our local businesses. Today our family is still involved in small business here. We started a disability service called Own 2 Feet, and we work in and around Southport with those who are less fortunate and differently abled than us. Because of the global pandemic, Queensland has been doing it tough. The Gold Coast has been doing it tough, and as a former board member of the Southport Chamber of Commerce, I know Southport has been doing it tough for a long time. So that's why I put my hand up to run as the Labor candidate, because I know how important small business is to our community. The Palaszczuk government has $7 billion planned supporting key initiatives for economic recovery. The plan is centred around jobs, creating jobs, building infrastructure for the Gold Coast and supporting local manufacturing and small businesses. The Spit, for example, the Palaszczuk Labor government has a master plan that will see projects fast-tracked to support jobs, enhance livability, safety and accessibility. This includes improvements to the promenade, plus $2 million to deliver a super yacht berth at Southport Yacht Club. There are too many things to mention individually, but other notable inclusions that we focused on are up to $10 million for seniors and accessibility assistance for critical home maintenance, $100 million for social housing construction, giving local tradies jobs, and over $40 million investment in localised mental health treatment. The Palaszczuk government's nation-leading health response has kept Queenslanders safe and healthy and put our state in the best possible position for economic recovery. And I'm looking forward to delivering this as part of the United Gold Coast Labor team.
Thank you, Susie. And over to you, Rob Mulhall for LNP.
Thanks very much, Dean, and good morning, everyone. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Rob Mulhook and I've been the state member for Southport for almost 10 years. And the reason that I'm running again is that I've got some unfinished business, as does the LNP. In the 2.5 short years that we were in government, we set about a very significant reform agenda for the state of Queensland and to bring our finances back under control and to start investing more and more in frontline services and infrastructure delivery. Sadly, what we've seen over the last 5 years is a frittering away of incredible opportunity by the current Labor government. Like Susie, I was born and raised in Southport. I've raised my family there. I attended Southport State School. I was a foundation student at Keebra Park State High School. And over the last 10, 15 years, I've been involved in a number of significant initiatives here on the Gold Coast and within Southport. I was a founding director of the Gold Coast Titans. I was the founding chairman and a director of the Gold Coast Community Fund, a charity that was set up to support disadvantaged individuals back in 2000. I have been a director of Bravehearts for the last 15 years and have a very strong commitment and passion to help disadvantaged children and to make a stand against child sexual assault in our community. And as a former councillor, I've worked very hard to deliver some of the infrastructure that the Gold Coast needs. And one particular piece of infrastructure that I'm very proud of, and against a tide of opinion back in 2004, 2008, I was the chair of the Gold Coast City Finance Committee that negotiated the final deal with McKell, who was the then Transport Minister of the Queensland Government, to get stage 1 of the light rail over the line. And when I say we have unfinished business, we have a lot of unfinished business. There are still road upgrades that need to be done. We need the second M1, and we need Ray Stevens and Gary Baldwin's vision of a light rail and a heavy rail network connecting every part of the city to be completed from Coolangatta to Coomera. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Please put your hands together for the candidates for Southport. Thank you. And can I have present candidates for Surfers Paradise? We've got Nelson, Quinn and Arjay Martin. Nelson is from the Greens and Arjay is from Reset Parliament. So we'll start off with Arjay from Reset Parliament.
G'day everyone. So my name's Arjay Martin. I have recently completed a Juris Doctor law degree at Bond University, and basically I would have already been practicing law if it wasn't for this illegal, unlawful and irrational COVID lockdown. I know that's a big statement, yet it is backed up by law. The lockdown itself has destroyed the economy in Queensland, in Australia and elsewhere. It is actually prohibited by Section 69, 117 and 92 of the Constitution. It has not even been legally gazetted in Queensland. So the COVID directions have no force of law in Queensland. That's as per the Statutory Instruments Act. We are living in a society where no one in Parliament is standing up against these illegal lockdowns. And sure, there was a big panic back in January, February, March, April, that this disease would be such a terrible disease and wipe out, a quarter of the population, all that kind of thing. Yet that has proven false. We also have the likes of Dr. Jeanette Young, who has banned the use of hydroxychloroquine based on a flawed study where there was a gentleman and he mixed up hydroxychloroquine with hydroxyquinoline, which the MP Craig Kelly did an excellent speech on recently. Basically, we have the incumbent, Mr. Longbroke, has been in the Parliament for 16 years. Surely all of his worthy, useful, helpful suggestions and ideas have been utilised by now. And if it's Longbroke, why not fix it? Also, we have had 31, like it was 31 years ago when we had the Fitzgerald inquiry, and isn't 31 years too long to flush away the corruption down the toilet? Thank you.
Thank you, Arjay. And Nelson Quinn from the Greens, please.
Thank you. I grew up on a farm in Queensland, which has now been in our family for more than 100 years. My association with the Gold Coast goes back to the 1960s. Probably gives me some kind of age record here. We've been living here permanently now for the last 6 years. I have worked for many years on legal, environmental and heritage matters with national, state and local governments, international organisations and community groups. I was 20 years a farmer. Now I'm a part-time researcher at Griffith University with a PhD in environmental law. The COVID crisis has exposed the problems that our governments have failed to cope with. Examples abound. For example, homelessness, domestic violence, overdependence on tourism and hospitality, precarious employment. There's also a personal element, as some of my family here have a couple of small businesses in the food services industry. We now have an unparalleled and unexpected opportunity to start building a better future. We need to be focusing on industries that protect our environment and protect our way of life against threats like climate change. Our planning processes here seem to please hardly anybody. Just look at the debates about Main Beach. So what we need to do is build for the future with better planning, sustainable industries, fairer society and community well-being. We have to fight for these things. We must help our most vulnerable people as much as we can. We must build on the skills and knowledge that abound in this city, among our enterprising people and our fine universities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nelson. And can we thank the candidates here today for the seat of Service Paradise. Thank you. I should also remind us that the sitting member, John Paul Langbrook, gives his apologies. He's had other duties this morning, but he would have liked to have been here. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the summary of our candidates for the various electorates of the Gold Coast, and I think you'd agree with me that we have to commend them on the preparation and the precision of what we've just seen over the last 45 or 50 minutes. We've heard their individual stories, we've heard diverse views, we've been addressed with different policies, and we've all seen, I think without exception, passionate personalities. So could you join me in please thanking them by applause for the preparation and energy they brought to this morning. Thank you. And it's a real stark contrast to what we see in other communities around the world, that we can have such interesting and diverse and open views and debates, and that's part of Australia and our little representation of it right here today, and I think that's a tremendous thing. So what we're on to now is the representatives of the various parties are going to be asked to speak on statewide issues. We're going to do this in two batches so that we comply with the COVID-19 regulations. And first up, we're going to have Megan Scanlon from the ALP, Ros Bates from the LNP, and Sharon Sewell from One Nation. If you could make your way to the stage, please. So each of these party representatives will have about 3 minutes, a little bit longer than the previous representations, to tell us why their party is the one that should lead the state. And I'd like to start off with Ros from LNP, please.
Sure. Thanks very much, Dean. Firstly, let me say that Queensland started 2020 off with the highest unemployment rate in the nation, with the lowest business confidence in the nation, and the most bankruptcies in the nation. Anastasia Palaszczuk was the last Premier to introduce a business stimulus, and she was the first Premier to stop having a budget. and in fact, the only Premier who didn't go ahead with the budget. So what that means is that Labor and the Government of Queensland is flying blind in our biggest economic crisis. Make no mistake, Queensland was in trouble well before COVID-19. The only plan that Anastasia Palaszczuk currently has is to keep the borders closed until Christmas. People and businesses need certainty. We need to know exactly what the government's plan is, and we will not see a budget under this government. Unlike the LNP who has already announced our congestion busting plans here on the Gold Coast for a second M1, we have announced a Department of Grunt so that the Coordinator General's failed projects, which have been stalled under this government, will actually get moving. We have a big, bold plan for the Bradfield scheme. We have seen the Palaszczuk government copy a lot of the LNP's policies. We had said that we would air condition every state school in Queensland. That was copied. We said we would build a second M1, and we will have shovels in the ground. And we said the Labor government pinched that proposal as well. Now, after a Labor government who has not built one dam in Queensland, except to decide to pull down the Paradise Dam, and we all remember what happened the last time Labor tried to build a dam. It was called the Mary River, ask the people in Gympie. The LNP does have a plan. We have plans to get infrastructure going. We, on top of what has already been funded under the current government, we will have an additional $1 billion worth of congestion busting, business growing projects across Queensland. We've also said that we will not introduce any new taxes. Under the Labor government, in the last 5 years, there have been 9 new or increased taxes. We've seen land tax go up twice. We've seen payroll tax go up. We have a waste levy. We have, as I said, the worst unemployment in the nation with no plan from the Labor government. Deb Freckington and the LNP team have plans to get our state moving again. And certainly here on the Gold Coast, we will make sure that we look after the businesses and that we do care about those people who've gone bust on the border thanks to Palaszczuk.
Thank you, guys. Can I ask Megan Scanlon to represent the ALP?
Thanks, Dean. Look, it's an honour to be here on behalf of the Palaszczuk government today, and many of you will know that the Premier held very firm on making sure that health was a priority in this state, and that's allowed us to open up more as a result of those strong measures. And it's why we are able to have this event here today, unlike many areas like Victoria and overseas. And I know some people would criticise some of those measures, and I know it's been difficult, but because of those measures, we've been able to kickstart our economy again and start developing and implementing our economic recovery plan, which I'll go into in a moment. But I just wanted to touch on a couple of points made by the member for Mudgeeraba in relation to the track record we have here on the Gold Coast. Under the Newman government, they held every single seat here on the Gold Coast and didn't deliver a single dollar for the M1. Also, didn't contribute to the light rail. We still have conflicting positions on the light rail from the LNP. The member for Burleigh wants it to dog leg, which would essentially mean the heavy rail is redundant. We have a very clear plan around infrastructure. We have the runs on the board. We've delivered the first stage of those M1 upgrades, and we're delivering the next ones. And we've also delivered stage 1 and 2 of the light rail. We're doing stage 3 right now, and we'll take it all the way down to Coolangatta as well. But in terms of our health response, we have to make sure that we're continuing to employ frontline service workers. We've always been a government around restoring those critical frontline health emergency workers, and we've employed more doctors, more nurses, and more frontline public health officials in this state than under the LNP, which has allowed us to do that important public health contact tracing. But in terms of business, I really wanted to talk about the things that probably matter to all of you, and I know it's been a difficult time. We've implemented a range of measures from payroll tax relief. We provided Q-Rider loans to the sum here on the Gold Coast of 1,100 Gold Coast businesses have received up to $250,000, totalling $14 million just on the Gold Coast in those loans. We've also provided 1,600 small businesses just on the Gold Coast with grants of up to $10,000, totalling $14 million. We provide $500 electricity rebates to businesses so that they can keep the lights on. We've accelerated roadworks like the ones I've just talked about, but also some local roads as well, like the Tooluna Street intersection and also Maudslin, Beaudesert Nerang Road. We have provided the Gold Coast City Council with funding to accelerate construction works, $8 million to get small local projects moving, $100 million to get more public housing, a big issue in this city. We need to provide more public housing, and we have the runs on the board when it comes to delivering over 300 public housing homes for vulnerable people within this community. And we're also working with industry. We've provided those industry support loans to our theme parks, who are big employers here on the Gold Coast, a new entryway at the Gold Coast Airport. There's a range of initiatives that I could go on about, but we have the runs on the board, and at the end of the day, this election will be who you trust, who has delivered for this city and who hasn't been everlasting government.
Thank you, Chairman Smith.